Welcome back to the Monday Morning Point Guard podcast. On today's episode, going to be discussing Paolo Banchero as a prospect. Where do I see his ceiling and floor? What are his strengths and weaknesses, as well as what role do I see him filling in the NBA? If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to like it as well as subscribe for weekly content. Also, the podcasts are now up on Spotify, so you can listen to the full episode uninterrupted there. And if there's a spot you agree with, disagree with, either reach out to us on Twitter or in that comment section, and we'd love to discuss with you. Rounding out the projected top three is Paolo Banchero, and entering the NCAA tournament, Paolo had very little buzz surrounding him as a potential number one overall pick. However, after a really strong showing in the tournament, he appears to be a very strong candidate for that number one overall spot. Banchero, as a player, he was a 6'10", 250-pound power forward at Duke with a 7-foot wingspan. He averaged about 17 points a game, 8 rebounds, 3 assists on 47% field goal shooting, 34% from the three-point line, and 73% on free throws. And Paolo, like the two guys he's going to be competing with for that number one overall pick, has the makings to be a unicorn at the next level. A big guy with excellent perimeter skills, but who can also dominate the paint. And for me, he represents the happy medium between what Chet Holmgren and Jabari Smith represent. While there is some risk in terms of drafting Paolo, he is a much safer bet than Chet Holmgren, but his potential doesn't quite reach the same level as it does for Chet. He also has higher potential than Jabari Smith, but he also has a slightly lower floor. He really splits the difference between the safe bet in Jabari Smith and the high risk, high reward player that is Chet Holmgren. He can really just do everything offensively and has basically every tool in the toolbox. There's almost nothing offensively that he's going to need to add from scratch to his game. It's just going to be a matter of improving, cleaning up, and polishing the skills that he already has. I think the biggest selling point for Paolo Banchero has to be his potential as a playmaker. Banchero handles and passes the ball better than most college guards, and he's shown a great ability to make quick reads either out of the post or off the dribble. Last week with Jabari Smith, I mentioned he had trouble reading the second level of defenders, and the ball just kind of tended to stick in his hands for too long. Neither of those are problems for Paolo Banchero. If you bring an ill-timed double team either on a post-up touch or when he's handling the ball out of the perimeter, he uses his height and vision to hit the open man. Mark Williams, the Duke center, was the beneficiary of some wide open dunk opportunities on the back of a beautiful read and an accurate and on-time feed from Paolo. And beyond that, he's just a really willing passer. He's always willing to move the ball along to a teammate, even if it means he's not getting the points or getting an assist on a certain possession. And just in general, he makes really quick decisions when he gets the ball, whether that be to drive, to shoot, hit a cutter, or simply make a swing pass to move the ball to the other side of the floor. He's always, the ball just never sticks in his hands for too long. And while the assist numbers aren't exactly eye-popping, he really does have the passing feel of a proper point guard. And his assists don't come off the back of dribbling the air out of the ball for an entire possession. They come off of opportunities where the defense is out of position, and he's able to instantaneously recognize those moments and make the right decision. At times at Duke, it almost felt like he was too willing to move the ball, too willing to trust in his teammates. Came at moments where it would have been better if he had pressed his matchup, or at times where Duke really needed someone to take over the game. But regardless, I would rather have a guy who's too willing to pass the ball than not willing enough. Handles-wise, you could easily mistake Paolo for a point guard if he wasn't a giant. Dribbling looks second nature to him, whether that be leading the fast break, setting up the offense, breaking down a defender, or dribbling the ball through traffic. He's always able to effortlessly kick it out to shooters or hit a guy like Mark Williams in the dunker spot, or take it all the way himself and finish at the rim. He's also really effective in the ISO game, which at his size is just insane. And with his ability to read the defense at the college level, he was able to create an advantage situation almost every time. On those ISO touches, it doesn't take him long to set up his moves. There isn't a lot of fluff like someone like James Harden has, dribbling the ball between his legs 40 times before making a move. He reads the situation, makes a quick and effective move, and then makes the correct decision more times than not on whether to pass it or take it himself. I think these ISO opportunities will be even more effective at the next level. Duke didn't have the greatest of spacing, and they had some non-shooters on the floor, and they also ran cutters and guys posting up that just ended up being in the way on a lot of Banchero's ISO chances. With NBA level spacing and an offense that has those ISO opportunities built in for Paolo, it could look even better. Scoring package wise, Banchero has it all. He's a three-level scorer capable of finishing around the hoop in the mid-range or hitting the three. He isn't quite the shooter that Jabari Smith is, but his shot mechanics still look really smooth and really solid. He has a great mid-range shot, and he's a pretty solid free throw shooter. So for me, there's no reason to think that he wouldn't be able to stretch that out to the three-point line with time. He might never be a sharp shooter, but he should be good enough that as a defender, it's something you have to cover. It's something you have to be mindful of, sort of like LeBron's three. While you aren't exactly game planning to take away the three-point shot from LeBron, it's not something that you just want to leave him wide open and leave him alone out there. I think Banchero could eventually reach that level as a shooter. Banchero also has really good footwork in the post and has the size and strength to finish inside. At the next level, he isn't likely going to be dominating centers in the paint, but if he gets a favorable switch or a team decides to go small against him, he could absolutely kill them inside. And that impressive footwork extends well beyond just the post. In the mid-range, he can effectively hit pull-ups or turnarounds, and it looks like it just comes naturally to him. If a defender is going to decide to overcommit to covering the basket on a drive, he could just pull up over the top. Or if the defense is committed too much to one side, like say to the left, he could spin right and go into a turnaround. He really can just do it all offensively, but what makes his scoring package so interesting is what his package actually looks like. Banchero isn't a big guy imitating a guard out there. And while his handle makes him look like a guard at times, his finishing is anything but. As I mentioned, Banchero is 6'10", 250 pounds, and he knows it. On those ISO opportunities I mentioned, he doesn't mess around and try to show off the guard skills. He really just melds the two worlds of dominating big guy and shifty guard together flawlessly. And when he gets an advantage on his man off the dribble, he's either barreling into their chest and finishing at the cup, or if they cut him off, he can flip it around and switch gears into like a post-up opportunity where he's either slowly pushing you under the hoop or dicing you up with the footwork. When you combine that with an ultra-effective mid-range game and a pretty serviceable three-point shot that you're at least having to worry about as a defender, it makes him a potential matchup nightmare. Big guys are too slow and just generally uncomfortable defending ball handlers out on the perimeter, and guards and wings are just going to get shoved under the hoop and bully balled. If either of those fail, he can carve you up with some really stellar footwork in the mid-range or around the basket. And if you resign yourself to double team him, he's carving you up with the passing. While Banchero is pretty much a complete offensive player, he is almost the opposite on the defensive end. He falls somewhere between complete liability and outright disaster. And the good news is he has all the tools to be a good defender at the next level. Maybe not a defensive anchor because A, I'm just not sure that he's the athlete required for that. And B, he's just got much too far to go defensively in terms of his development to get to like a defensive anchor level. But at 6'10" and 250 pounds, he should at least be solid on that end. And there's no reason that he shouldn't at least be a net neutral defensively. I'm not sure if this is good news or not, but most of his defensive issues could be attributed to a lack of effort or laziness as opposed to not having the tools or the know-how. Not to say he has a great feel on the defensive end, because he certainly does not, but he has shown flashes here and there of being a good defensive player. But for the most part, the effort has just been abominable. He rarely gets low in his defensive stance, which allows the offensive player to completely blow by him. And when on the ball, and off the ball, he tends to be aloof and just unfocused. Cutters get right by him. He's late on help side. And when he does help, he doesn't scramble back to his man. His closeouts are just a total joke too. He either doesn't get out there at all, or because he doesn't get low in that defensive stance, his man just goes right around him off the dribble. If you're feeling really pessimistic about him defensively and just overall as a prospect, you might be saying, well, if he didn't try on that end in college under Coach K, why would that change in the NBA? And I think that's really fair, but you could also be optimistic about it and say maybe with time and age, he's going to mature and learn his lesson that defense actually matters. Regardless, it's a real concern. Either he doesn't have the know-how in terms of what to do on that end, which is not going to be the easiest thing to teach, or he doesn't care, which is not something that you even can teach. That lack of assertiveness also extends beyond the defensive end. Despite nearly 8 rebounds a game, there are just far too many times he gets pushed under the hoop or out of position just because he isn't interested in fighting for a rebound. That lack of focus on defense and rebounding are my biggest concerns for him. The rest of my concerns are mostly nitpicks. Offensively, he isn't quite as active off the ball as I would like. He just isn't moving around enough or working to get open in his spots. And I can't fully put that on him. That could be as a result of the Duke offense. And just in general, that Duke team was ultra talented and had a ton of mouths to feed offensively. So maybe there were opportunities for him to really work off the ball there. Chet Holmgren a couple weeks ago was a guy that I discussed as staying really busy off the ball and knowing where to be and when to be there on both ends of the floor. I just find that Paolo does a lot of standing and watching on both ends of the floor, and I really don't like that. Also, athletically, he just isn't quite as explosive of an athlete as you might hope. He's pretty quick, but vertically, he just isn't quite there. A lot of his finishing comes underneath the rim, and that verticality is ultimately why I don't think he'll ever be an elite shot blocker or an elite rim protector at the next level, and why most likely you're going to need to play a center alongside him, despite him having a 7-foot wingspan. Comps wise, I want to stick with offensive comps because my best defensive comp for him would be a statue. Chris Webber is one of the ones I've seen the most, and I have to agree. Webber was really ahead of his time, and he was a do-it-all power forward. He never quite reached his full potential, but he could score at every level and had some real passing skill. As far as the Webber versus Banchero, Webber was far superior as an athlete, but Banchero is a much better ball handler. I would also say that Paolo's jump shot is far better than what Webber was working with, at least eye test wise, but Chris Webber was a beast in the paint. I also see a lot of Chris Bosh and Banchero, and while Bosh wasn't much of a perimeter off the dribble scorer, he had some really slick 1-2 dribble moves in the mid-range, finishing with some pull-ups or turnarounds. And just in general, I think Bosh was a slightly better athlete in terms of vertically finishing at the hoop, but Banchero is much stronger in terms of playing bully ball. Also, Banchero is much better as a ball handler. The last comp I want to discuss is the playmaking piece. Webber did a lot of his playmaking out of the post as a big man, and Webber was also just a really flashy passer. No doubt all that time with white chocolate really rubbed off on him. Banchero gets a lot of his assists in more of a guard context, but due to his size, he's able to just look over the top of the defense and pass over the top of the defense. Also, while there are some no-look passes, his passing is more function over style, and that's not a bad thing by any means. So who does Banchero remind me of as a playmaker? For me, it's got to be Blake Griffin, and obviously the scoring package and athletically, they're totally different players, but as playmakers, they look very similar. Young Blake was a menace on the fast break and was really underrated at reading the defense and finding the open man. Ball handling wise, it didn't always look pretty for Blake, but it was really effective. Banchero is ahead of Blake in terms of a ball handler, but they both see the floor very similarly and use their height as a means to see and get the ball to open teammates. Banchero on the break might not be the threat to rise up over the top and put you on some ridiculous poster like Blake, but he's still really effective at getting to the rim and finishing due to his strength and touch. Role-wise, Banchero is really malleable. Ultimately, he's going to need opportunities where he can create for himself and for others. You're obviously going to want him to lead the fast break, but he also makes really great reads in the half court. Obviously, you can run him as the roll guy in the pick and roll to help create some mismatches that he can take advantage of in the post. He can also pop out to the three-point line or the mid-range for a quick shot. And in the case that the defense doesn't switch, you can clear out for him and let him take that big guy off the dribble. Since Banchero is such a great ball handler and passer, I think it would be really interesting to run a pick and roll with him as the ball handler. You could either do something like an inverted pick and roll with the guard setting the screen to create some more mismatches for your team. But since you're going to have to likely run a center alongside of him due to his defensive deficiencies, why not run a dual big pick and roll and really lean into that advantage? Either your center could end up with a favorable matchup with a smaller wing on him, or in the case that the opponent is running two bigger players out there, there's almost no chance they're going to know how to defend that pick and roll. Bigs are used to guarding the roll man on the pick and roll, so they will be extremely uncomfortable in a situation where they're going to have to chase around a ball handler and fight through a screen versus just play drop coverage or hedge. Just in general, the best way to use Banchero is to go mismatch hunting. So just any situations that will help create mismatches are going to be key for him. In terms of his potential, Banchero has all NBA potential written all over him. He has the tools to become a really great scorer at the next level. And when you combine that with his playmaking, he could rack up some really gaudy stats and some crazy triple doubles. I have no doubt he's going to translate as a scorer and a playmaker at the next level, but defensively will be the big question mark for him. If he never buys it defensively, he will just never be a winning player. I think the offensive numbers will always be there for him, but record-wise, without the defense, it's just not going to amount to any level of winning. It's hard enough to hide and cover for a small guard like Trae Young, but a player Banchero's size is impossible to hide out there. And at his position, he just can't be a total liability on defense. Players at that center and power forward spot just don't win if they don't play defense. It's a position that's typically the anchor of your defense. So when there's a huge hole there, no amount of game planning can cover up for that. If Banchero buys in defensively and is at least a net neutral on that end, the sky is really the limit for him.